Um, as a counselor, I get to see crazy people, which is part of the fun, because I think everybody's a little bit crazy. There's just those who know they're a little bit crazy and those that don't know it. They really distinguish between us. And I was seeing a woman in counseling for some time, and she had a difficult marriage. And I got to the point that I thought, it would help if I brought her husband in, or not if I brought him in, but if he chose to come in, so I could kind of get the other side of the story, because I felt like, I've gotten her side and there's some problems here, can I get his side? And he decided to come in. And so we were talking, and I was meeting him and getting to know him and asked about how the relationship was going, which is what you do. And, I was hearing a little more balanced side of the conflicts. They had conflicts about things like love and power and intimacy and things that you would not care about at all. But I noticed while we were talking that I really felt like I could get along with this guy. I mean, there's some people you feel like there's just no connection. I felt there was a connection there. And so far, so good. And I felt, okay, we can work together, the three of us. It was okay. And then, and I remembered her telling me, it's always okay when you agree with him. Just don't screw up and disagree. And I thought, okay, that's just her projection from her mother, forget it. And so we got to some point, and I remember them saying, he kept saying, obviously, doctor, she's the problem, she's seeing you. Helpful things like that. Now, he wasn't that mean or anything. He was just saying kind of like it was all her and trying to ally with me, which is what happens in counseling a lot. Can't you see what I'm dealing with? And not knowing that that's kind of part of my training is to see that. And I finally said something like, well, Bill, it looks like a lot of times you really do cut her off and negate her feelings. And it seems like she's got a point here. And immediately it was like watching The Exorcist. Like his head spun around, and he kind of came at me like, oh, you're on her side too, just like everybody else. Well, I'll tell you, and all of a sudden, he was coming after me for being like her, and we weren't good buddies anymore. You ever had that kind of relationship where as long as you're agreeing with their way of life and agreeing with their look on life, everything's pretty good. But if you screw up and have a thought, all of a sudden, you're in trouble. And I said something like, you've got a lot of strong reactions about this, and we made a lot more progress and things went well. But my whole point was, the point I'm making for us is, a lot of times we have interactions with people that we really do care about and want to have a better relationship with, but something, no matter what we do, breaks down, goes wrong, we can't get it straight, can't get it right. And that's what we're going to be talking about the next few weeks, is who's pushing your buttons, and why are they pushing your buttons, and why do you have those buttons inside you in the first place, and how can you debutton your buttons, and how can you work with the person that's pushing your buttons, okay? So the reason that I even wrote the book about who's pushing buttons and wanted to talk about it was because all of us who are into relationships at all, which is all of us pretty much, the way God designed us, all of us want to have a pretty good relationship with certain core people we're married to or dating or, in a family with or neighbors with or in business with or whatever. And there is a certain percentage of those people that we have a difficult time getting along with. Let me ask you guys, what is it about your button pusher that drives you crazy? Because everybody's got a different thing that drives them crazy. If your button pusher's here, you don't have to say anything, because that'd be a problem. But if they're not here, because you told them you were coming out shopping, they don't know you're here tonight because you're undercover, you can speak freely. Very critical people. It's very hard for someone to get past criticism. The criticism pushes my buttons. What else? Lots of demands that I can't meet or shouldn't meet or don't know if I can meet. Anger. Where does it come from? How does it come from? Is it, out of the blue? Their timing? What do you mean? Oh, there's a certain season of time when my buttons are more pushable and all that. Okay. There's a number of things they do, but what I want to do tonight is I've got 4 little goals for us, because we're going to have time to go into this over the next few weeks. So I can give you a map of how we're going to deal with it. And tonight's map is we're going to talk about understanding the 3 essential components that make a button pusher, so you know whether you've got one or not and what flavor you've got, because the 3 essential components define one. And then we're going to talk about how they affect your life. And I want to make a kind of like a global statement, which is this isn't about bashing. This isn't about, us saying, woe is me, I live with the devil. It's not about that at all, because God is really into redeeming your button pusher as well as yourself. And there's a big difference in our feelings. Our immediate feelings say, how can I, either get rid of them or give them a lobotomy or kill them, or... That's the revenge motif that the Bible talks about as the law. The law, when we have the law inside of us, the law says, well, if you screw up, you're dead. That's revenge. And God is a lot more into redemption and redeeming and buying back your button pusher than he is into revenge. So, having said that, if you've got an outline, let's first talk about their life problems, because one of the things that I'm going to develop is that you can identify if you've got a button pusher or not by the life problems that they bring to the table. Now, there are 2 kinds of life problems. There are what we call, or psychologists call, the symptoms. The things that happen in life, the behaviors. For example, somebody mentioned rage. Somebody that's mad all the time, that's a life problem. That's a symptom problem. That comes from somewhere else. That's not the problem. It's the problem, it's fruit. There's an alcohol problem, somebody that drinks too much, or somebody that's got a substance abuse problem. That's a problem, but it's not the root. There are also things like people who are impulsive, or they are deceptive, or whatever. Now, those drive us crazy, right? Those are hard to live with, especially if you have a close relationship with that person. But those aren't the real problem. The real problem with the button pusher, the life issues that they bring, are what we call character issues. Character, which is the architecture of who you are inside, which is the way that you're made up. It's the way you feel, it's your values. It's like if you're a house, it's your inner foundation. And I want to talk about a few of the character issues that really create a button pusher. And there's going to be a few of these, because not every button pusher is the same. Don't fall into the idea that they're all got self-esteem problems. Oh, they're all self-centered. No, some of them aren't self-centered, and some of them don't have self-esteem problems. Some of them, in fact, self-esteem is like too darn good. I mean, that's part of the problem. But I'm going to give you some of the basics. One is some emotional withdrawal. Emotional withdrawal, being what we would call emotionally unavailable. When you need something from them and they don't provide the love, the grace, the compassion, the warmth, the understanding. That's what emotional avoidance is when you need a resource from them that the relationship should have, and they don't provide it. Sometimes it's a can't, a lot of times it's a won't. Like the guy I was talking about, he seemed to be really connected to me and his wife until I challenged him, and then he cut it all off. And he got mad, pulled away, pouted, got mad, kind of came at us. But button pushers often cut off the source of love. And that's one of the biggest problems in relationships, because relationships are about love. They're about connection. If they're about anything, they're about 2 people whose hearts are beating together. And when one of those people pulls that off and says, for now or for a long time or for a short time, I am unavailable to you, that's really hard. You ever been with somebody that saw you as a bad person no matter what you did? No matter what you did, if it was a big mistake or a little mistake or no mistake, you couldn't get on their good side again because they were so sure you were the bad guy. That's really kind of a form of hell inside, because we all want to be loved. Another one is irresponsibility. Irresponsibility. Like the guy that Peter Pan type, the guy that won't grow up, or the Peter Panette, or I can't say Wendy, because Wendy was the codependent mother in that book, so I can't. She's not a Peter Pan at all. But Somebody who wants to stay a child and kind of wants somebody else to solve their financial problems, solve their emotional problems, solve their relational problems. You solve my problems, I want to go have fun, I'm going to make a mess, you're cleaning up my mess. And eventually they find someone who does that. And that's a life issue. That's a character issue. It's irresponsibility. Another one is control. Control. When, for some reason or some way, the person resists people in their life having freedom. Freedom to make different choices. Freedom to say, I don't want to go here, I'd rather go to this restaurant. Little stuff. Or big stuff like, I want to put the finances here instead of there. Or I want to live here. And a lot of times a person who is into control kind of goes along as you go along. But were you to make a decision different than them, all of a sudden, they feel persecuted, they attack, and there's like bad things happening. I mean, there are a couple of kinds of control. There's direct control that, you see somebody who is threatening or dominating or raises their voice or escalates or, yells. Basically your 3-year-old in a 200-pound body. Then there's the indirect control, the more manipulation control, the guilt control. Like, there's my crying at night, keep you awake, sweetheart. You got two kinds of control that happen. And either way, it gets triggered when the other person asserts freedom and choice. So if you want to find out if there's a control problem in your relationship, it's very simple to do that. Just say, I disagree. Or just say no. Or just say, I don't think I'll do that, and see if they have a tantrum or if they go, oh, okay, can we talk about it? Yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, we still disagree. All right, that's fine. But if you get a tantrum, you got a control problem. And there are several more like this. For example, there is self-centeredness. I mentioned that's one of them. It's not all of them, but a lot of times a button pusher has a very difficult time getting out of what psychologists call their orbit. Their orbit is about how they see things and feel things, and they really want you to understand them because they think that their way of looking at life is the right way. But if you have a different perspective, not even a different perspective, but if you say, I'd like you to see what my world's like, they have a really difficult time empathetically entering your world and saying, oh gosh, that's how you feel? That's different than me. We have two different preferences. They pretty much have some kind of inabilities to get out of their perspective and into the other person's perspective. And so the arguments end up being some kind of not being understood, and the other person just kind of gives up sooner or later because they can't break out of the orbit. So, having said that, realize that all of us do these things. I mean, why do you think I wrote this book? Because, I have button pusher in my DNA also, and I understand this. But even while all of us bring these to the table in some form or fashion, some of us are more disconnected than others, some of us are more responsible, irresponsible, controlling, not controlling, and all that, that the button pusher tends to have it in higher degrees. They just tend to have it because they haven't worked on it, looked at it, owned it, taken a look, taken the glasses to it. Jesus said, if you want to clean out things inside, he said, you've got to go to the light, because in your eye, if it's full of light, everything's okay. But if you're not looking inside and cleaning out the gunk, you're going to have a crummy vision. And generally speaking, the button pusher's never been through a period where they've looked at these things. So they bring issues to life. They have issues and they come out in the relationship. Now the second part, if you're in the outline, it says understanding them, is the problem of ownership. Now, ownership is one of those psychobabble words. What does that mean? Well, it has to do with what the Bible would call responsibility. A sense of responsibility for my contribution to our relationship. Especially my contribution to the problems in our relationship. You see, we were designed to have really, really high ownership of our problems. We were designed to be people who were always like, I want to make sure I'm not hurting us, and I want to make sure I'm not hurting you, and I want to make sure that the way I'm living life is good for you and brings you life and brings you happiness and doesn't bring you down or doesn't bring you hurt or doesn't get in your way. That's why you read in Psalm 139, for example, where David says, search me and know me and try my heart. Get inside me, God, and see, am I screwing my friends up? Am I screwing my mate up? It's what Alcoholics Anonymous calls the self-scrutinizing person. They're taking that lens to themselves and saying, how am I doing? They're self-monitoring people. Henry and I have a leadership intensive week several times a year down in the Southern California area, where leaders from across the country come in for a week to a retreat center, and they live there, and they go through intensive teachings and groups about leadership and their character. And one of the things that often occurs is that there'll be a 360 that comes in from the leaderships, whether it's a person who's a Fortune 500 person or somebody who's in middle management or a teacher or a professor or a pastor or whatever, and they have a thing called a 360. Have you ever heard of a 360? In business, a 360 is an evaluation by those people that you work with and the people that are under you and the people that are over you. That's why it's called 360. People around you are sending in evaluations of what kind of person they think you are to give some sense of, a person's issues. And you'll find often that when people get the reviews, they'll be like shocked, like, I didn't know people thought this of me. I didn't know they thought that I was aloof. I didn't know that they thought that I was, all by myself. I thought the fact that I only spoke to people once a year was, a good sign. And they're kind of be shocked at the feedback they get because they haven't had people around them keeping them in ownership. Ownership is when you regularly are concerned about your effect on other people. Now, button pushers, one of the things that creates and describes a button pusher is that they really, really have a very, very either undeveloped or negative sense of ownership over their problems. Most of the time, when a problem comes up and their friend or their mate or somebody they're dating or whatever says, I got a problem here with, you're late all the time and it hurts my feelings, or the way you're mad, or what you're doing with the money or whatever. Guess who the button pusher says is the source of that problem? This is not rocket science. Take a chance here. Yeah, right. Whoever it is, it's not them. And they have what we call an externalized sense of responsibility, that whoever's causing the problems is not me. It's a not me experience. They kind of live in the not me. And sometimes they're right. We don't always cause every problem we're in, but if you look at the laws of statistics, if you're around a lot of problems all the time, the odds are you're part of that problem. Unless you're just a magnet for jerks, which is a different topic we'll talk about. So the button pusher has a low sense of ownership, and they project the responsibility on other people. Let me tell you a few of the ways that they will do this. One is by, I guess rationalization is the best word to use for it, where you just kind of explain something away as having, not a bad effect. For example, I know I punched a hole in the wall, but I did bring you a latte. Now, somebody brought me a latte, so this person didn't punch holes. But the rationalization is, why should you be mad at me? I'm making nice. I'm going to rub your feet. I'm going to be nice to you. I'm going to be affectionate to you. And that's going to clean the slate. And a lot of times, the other party is saying, what? You just were mean to me, or selfish, or you punched a hole in the wall. And they say, but look, it's a good latte. It's the best quality. And they really do expect kind of like a, let's start from here. You know what? Sometimes you should start from there. I really believe that, like when the Bible says it's a glory to a man to overlook an offense, sometimes you go say, bad day, I've had bad days. But, and here's the important part, if you see a pattern, if this isn't the first time you've gotten a latte, if you start to notice a pattern, you are making an error by saying, okay, it's all okay now. Thanks for the latte, because it's going to happen again. The character didn't change. That's rationalization. Here's another one. Defensiveness. When you mention a problem and you try to, sometimes it's our fault because we, get mad or blame, but basically, the healthier person is, the less defensive they are. So you say, there's a problem. Immediately they say, there you go again. I never do anything right for you. I can't please you. Look at you, and all of a sudden, you're kind of like, this is strange. I came to you with a problem, and now I'm the problem. How'd that transfer happen? Anybody ever had that experience? That's a very long conversation. I thought I was the injured party, and now I'm the perpetrator. Interesting. But that's what defensiveness does. Here's another one. When you talk to them about problems, they excuse it. Well, I'm stressed. Well, get a grip. I mean, yeah, you're stressed. You're a human. You live in the 21st century. Life is stressful. And I'm not saying stress doesn't matter, but watch out for somebody who plays the stress card all the time. That card kind of ends up with less chips after a while. When they excuse it on either their genetics or Adam and Eve or God or you, and like there's always some other problem because of their tough life, or the freeway was bad, or, there was an earthquake in Antarctica. I mean, how could I be nice to you? Begin to see, this isn't working. Here's another one. Denial. I didn't do it. Denial often happens when a person feels something from the other person, like it feels like you're cutting me off, or you're mad at me, or not saying anything. No, I'm not. Well, why haven't we spoken for 7 years? Well, if you really love me, you would. All of a sudden, you begin to see in denial that there's an emotional reality between you two, what some people sometimes call the elephant underneath the carpet. And you know it's there. You know the coldness is there, or the hurt's there, or the mad there. But you say to them, do you feel this? I mean, it's kind of big. And they go, nope, nothing there. What's for lunch? That's what we call denial. And your button pusher, for some reason, lives without ownership of what they're doing. Now, there are two types of reasons, or two main reasons why button pushers do that, why they have low ownership. And it's very important to understand yours, because, and sometimes it's a combination, because the cure or the fixing that we'll get to later has to do with understanding this. Some of them can't look at themselves deeply and say, what am I doing? Because they're afraid. They're afraid to look at their dark side. They're afraid to look at their bad habits or attitudes. They're afraid to look at what they do. And a lot of times it's because they have an intense, harsh voice inside them that says, if you're a little bit bad, you're guess what? You're all bad. If I admit a little mistake here, I'm going to just be negative on myself and beat myself up. It's what the Bible calls a harsh conscience. They have this judge inside there that beats them up with a hammer. It's really, really harsh and mean. And they can't afford to look at little things they do, because it opens the cracks for big things they do. That's why a lot of people are defensive. I'm in a position of life now where both of my wife and our kids are teenagers. Pray for us. And so we spend a lot of time with teenagers, because that's who our life is. And we're doing teenage things with teenage people and teenage parents and parents of teenagers and all this. I mean, that's kind of our life. It's what we're swimming in. And it's interesting to see the kid that last year was like 12 and so sweet and so compliant and kind of thinks parents are cool, and hugs mom at the soccer game. And then at 13, who threw the switch? All of a sudden, this kid, rules, what are you talking about? I don't follow your thinking rules. And, they're defiant, and they got a bad attitude, and they don't want to be with you, and, they got 14 nose rings and 18, eyebrow rings, and all this sort of thing. You think, who abducted this child and put an alien's, mind in them? And the teenage path that's going on is, generally speaking, the right path, that they've got to integrate their dark side. That's what teenagers are about. It's like integrating aggression and sexuality and their own thoughts and their own feelings, and they're mad, and what do they do about rules? And the ones that get through that okay, they kind of turn into a thing called a human later. And the ones that don't get through that okay either stay like a clone of their parents, or they stay mad forever or whatever. And a lot of people that had a really bad adolescence, sometimes a really bad childhood, will be very defensive because they don't know what to do with their dark side. They don't know how to open up about it and admit it and talk about it and still feel loved and still feel okay and still feel safe. For them to admit a little problem is a big problem. So that's the first reason that some button pushers don't own. The second one is that some button pushers don't own their stuff, their issues, because they have what we call entitlement. Entitlement. Now, that's another psychobabble word. Entitlement is basically an inability to experience that you have any faults at all. You know, part of the parenting process is to show your child that they have mistakes, that mom and dad make mistakes, and you make mistakes, and then we all grow up and we get along. Some people have never had someone get in their face and say, you're really causing a problem here. And that's one of the jobs of good parents and good spouses and good friends and good teachers and good employees and good dates. People should be kind of on a regular basis in loving and gentle but very direct ways saying, I got a problem with you. Because otherwise we kind of run wild thinking, you know, we've created the universe. Sometimes people, for lack of experiences or not having the right experiences with other people in their life, they feel so entitled that they deserve special treatment and they deserve special things. And so they never really come to terms with the fact that they cause life problems in other people. See, that's not a fear. These people aren't afraid of getting beat up and feeling guilty and bad and all that like in the first group. These people have no awareness at all that there's anything wrong with them. And actually that's a more serious problem, because to the very core of themselves, they really don't get why you're bugged or why other people are bugged. And so some people, and you know, the way it works out, are kind of a combination of both. You know, they're a little afraid and also kind of resistant. But be aware that you've got to be able to know, as we'll talk about later, how to deal with both aspects of the problem. So that's the second issue, is that your button pusher has a low sense of ownership or responsibility over the brain damage and pain that they cause the relationship. Because, you know, a button pusher can be someone very, very mild, like, you know, here we are during the holiday season, so everybody's going to have lunch with Uncle Harry. And Uncle Harry's weird, and he's hard to be along with, and he talks too much, or he's whatever, and that's why we only see him during Thanksgiving. And we, you know, do other things, like turn up the television when he's around, and you know that, you know, in another year, you can wait a year. Now, that's not a serious button pusher, because Thanksgiving or Christmas only comes once a year. Then there's more severe ones where a person's really, on a day-to-day level, kind of getting in the way of life for you and family and friends and all that. And that can be more serious. Here's the third thing, is your involvement. Your involvement. And what I mean by involvement is that the only reason your button pusher can push your buttons is if you're involved with them. Meaning, a button pusher matters to you. Your life is entwined with your button pusher. I talk about in the book, it's always about blood, love, or money. That's how they get intertwined with you. That's not a bad thing. That's a really good thing. You know, either it's a family or a marriage relationship, there's blood there between you two, and it's good blood. Or it's love because of somebody you're dating or want to get close to. Or it's money, meaning business or, you know, financial relationships or whatever. And most relationships are connected by those things. Just friendships or functional relationships. But here's the point. If you weren't emotionally invested with this person, they couldn't push your buttons. You know, the guy that takes you to the airport in the taxi and he drives too fast and, you know, he swerves around and he's rude, he's not your button pusher. He's probably somebody else's. He's not yours because you're not going to see him again. But the person that you're living with or see every day or see quite often, or your life is kind of, your path is moved together with their path, that's your button pusher. And see, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll think, I'll just cut this thing off. That'll solve it. I'll wash this person out of my hair. And there certainly are people that need to be disconnected from us. But before you do that, realize that your involvement is probably a good thing, or could be a really good thing. It's not a bad thing that you got connected to this person. You were designed by God to be in relationship, to be connected, to be close, or to want to be close. But the involvement is a problem, and it's a problem in several ways. And let me ask you this, because some of you guys have been down this road. What is it about your attachment to the button pusher that's caused problems? The fact that you care about them, how does that cause problems? Because it does cause a problem. It hurts you when you see what they're doing is hurting themselves, because you understand the big picture. Like a mom sees her kids and says, don't run out in traffic. You're saying to this person, you're going to go off a cliff, and you can see that. Yeah. Let me give you some of the reasons that this is a problem. First, the fact that you're involved means that they can get inside. They can get inside. How many of you have had the experience that there's a certain word or phrase your button pusher can use, and it's like it either makes you want to go get the machete and use it on yourself or on them or on both of you? I mean, it's mass murder time.